Have you ever noticed how chosen ones rarely experience spiritual shifts quietly? Something always interrupts the normal pattern. A sudden awakening in the middle of the night. A dream that feels more real than reality itself. An unexplained heaviness sitting on your chest even though nothing physically happened. Most people dismiss these moments immediately. They call it stress, overthinking, anxiety, or exhaustion. But what they fail to understand is that the spirit often detects movement long before the mind can explain it logically. And last night, something inside you detected a shift. That is why your peace suddenly changed. That is why your thoughts became unusually intense. That is why you could not fully settle back into sleep, as if some invisible part of you was trying to remain alert. Because when heaven is preparing to move something in a chosen one's life, the spirit is often awakened before the physical world catches up. Your body may have been lying in bed, but your spirit was responding to something deeper. Chosen ones carry a sensitivity that most people do not understand. They feel atmospheres changing before conversations happen. They sense distance before separation becomes visible. They experience spiritual tension before major transitions unfold in reality. And what happened to you last night was not random discomfort. It was awareness. Something inside your spirit recognized that an old season is shifting and a new one is beginning to approach. That is why the night felt unusual. Heaven was interrupting your routine to get your attention before life changes direction. Because sometimes God will disturb your comfort to prepare your awareness. He will allow restlessness to expose what your daily distractions have been hiding. And while your mind kept searching for a logical explanation, your spirit already understood the deeper truth. Something is changing around you spiritually, and your soul responded before your eyes could fully see it. One of the strangest things about spiritual transitions is that heaven rarely announces them with comfort. Most of the time, God interrupts peace before he changes direction. That's why what happened to you last night felt so unsettling. Something shifted internally that your conscious mind could not fully explain yet. You may have tried to ignore it at first. You may have convinced yourself it was stress, exhaustion, or just another restless night. But deep down, your spirit knew the feeling was different. It carried weight. It carried urgency. It carried the kind of emotional disruption that does not disappear simply because you distract yourself for a few hours. And the reason it felt so intense is because chosen ones often experience spiritual repositioning before external reality visibly changes. Heaven will disturb your comfort before allowing you to continue walking in the wrong direction. That discomfort becomes a signal, a warning, a preparation. Because God understands something most people refuse to acknowledge. Humans become attached to environments, relationships, routines, and identities long after those things stop serving their purpose. People stay in places that drain them because familiarity feels safer than transformation. They cling to emotional cycles that quietly destroy their peace because uncertainty feels terrifying. And sometimes the only way heaven can break that attachment is through interruption. That is exactly why your peace suddenly shifted. Something around you is changing spiritually, and your soul detected it before your physical circumstances fully revealed it. The strange feeling last night was not sent to punish you. It was sent to wake you up. Because there are moments when God intentionally allows restlessness to enter your spirit, so you stop ignoring what your intuition has been trying to reveal for months. Maybe you have been tolerating environments that no longer align with your growth. Maybe you have been holding on to people your spirit already outgrew. Maybe you have been suppressing an inner knowing because obeying it would require painful change. But heaven sees what comfort keeps hiding from you. And when a season is ending, peace often disappears before clarity arrives. That is why chosen ones frequently experience emotional heaviness before major transitions. The spirit recognizes movement before the mind accepts it. Suddenly, conversations feel different. Energy shifts around people you once trusted. Places that once felt normal begin feeling emotionally exhausting. Even your routines start feeling strangely disconnected, as if your soul no longer fits inside the version of life you have been trying to maintain. Most people ignore those signs because they fear disruption. But chosen ones are eventually forced to confront them because their calling requires evolution. And evolution always disturbs comfort. That's the painful truth about spiritual growth. God will not allow you to remain emotionally asleep once your next season is ready to begin. He will interrupt patterns that no longer align with your future. He will expose hidden tension beneath fake stability. He will create internal discomfort so strong that you can no longer pretend everything is fine. And while it feels confusing in the moment, that discomfort is often protection operating beneath the surface. Because what feels peaceful is not always safe. Some environments slowly suffocate your purpose while appearing stable externally. Some relationships drain your spirit while still looking acceptable to everyone around you. Some opportunities delay your destiny because they keep you emotionally comfortable enough to avoid transformation. And heaven sees all of it clearly. That's why the interruption came before the destruction. God was pulling your attention towards something your conscious mind kept overlooking. The restlessness was revealing what your distractions kept suppressing. The heaviness was exposing what your routine kept normalizing. And even though you may not fully understand it yet, your spirit already recognizes that something cannot continue the way it has been. That is why the night felt spiritually charged. It was not random anxiety. It was divine disturbance. A signal that your soul is being repositioned for a new chapter your current environment may no longer be able to contain. And the deeper truth is this: every major transformation in a chosen one's life begins with disruption first. Before God elevates you, He unsettles you. Before He redirects you, He interrupts your comfort. Before clarity arrives, confusion often exposes what no longer belongs. Because heaven is not trying to make you fearful, it is trying to make you aware. And what happened last night may have been the beginning of your spirit finally waking up to a reality your heart has sensed for a very long time. There is a reason certain dreams, feelings, and unexplained thoughts refuse to leave your mind after you wake up. It is because not every message speaks through logic. Sometimes heaven communicates through symbols, impressions, emotional weight, and quiet revelations your conscious mind cannot immediately process. And what happened to you last night carried that exact kind of spiritual intensity. The dream felt different. The feeling lingered longer than normal. The atmosphere around it stayed heavy even after the night ended. That is because your spirit was being shown something your daily distractions have been helping you avoid. During the day, noise protects denial. Responsibilities, conversations, routines, social media, and constant stimulation keep people disconnected from their deeper awareness. Humans become experts at suppressing intuition because intuition often demands uncomfortable truth. But at night, when the world becomes silent and external distractions weaken, the soul becomes harder to ignore. That is why chosen ones frequently receive their deepest revelations during moments of stillness. Heaven waits until the noise fades because truth becomes clearer in silence. And what your spirit encountered last night was not random imagination. It was exposure. Something hidden beneath the surface of your life briefly revealed itself, even if your conscious mind is still struggling to fully interpret it. Maybe the sign exposed emotional exhaustion you have been pretending not to feel. Maybe it revealed hidden betrayal your intuition has sensed, but your heart refused to accept. Maybe it exposed an environment draining your spirit while your mind kept calling it normal. Whatever the message was, one thing became undeniable. Your soul reacted because something inside you recognized truth. That is why the feeling stayed with you after waking up. Real spiritual signs leave residue. They create tension inside the spirit because they disrupt illusions the mind became comfortable maintaining. And for chosen ones, those moments often arrive right before major transformation. Because God cannot elevate someone who continues ignoring what is quietly destroying them internally. That's why the dream, thought, or feeling became so emotionally intense. Heaven was not trying to confuse you. It was trying to reveal what comfort kept hiding. Many people continue repeating painful cycles simply because they never stop long enough to listen to what their spirit already knows. They silence discernment with distraction. They ignore emotional warnings until consequences become unavoidable. But chosen ones are often interrupted before destruction fully unfolds. God will disturb your peace before allowing you to remain blind to what threatens your future. And last night may have been one of those moments. A spiritual interruption powerful enough to force your awareness deeper than your usual routines allow. Because sometimes the soul recognizes danger before the eyes can see it clearly. Sometimes the spirit detects misalignment before the physical world confirms it. And that inner knowing becomes impossible to silence once heaven brings it to the surface. Suddenly, you begin rethinking conversations, relationships, environments, and patterns you once ignored automatically. Things that once felt normal now feel spiritually heavy. Certain people feel different energetically. Certain paths no longer feel peaceful internally. That is not paranoia. That is discernment awakening. Your spirit is beginning to separate truth from illusion. And while that process feels emotionally uncomfortable, it is also sacred. Because awareness is the beginning of transformation. The sign was never sent to trap you in fear. It was sent to pull you out of unconsciousness. Heaven was revealing what your distractions could no longer hide. And even though your mind may still search for logical explanations, your spirit already understands something profound. Last night was not random. It was a moment of exposure powerful enough to redirect your entire future if you choose to listen to it instead of dismissing it. What most people fail to understand is that spiritual warfare intensifies whenever a chosen one is approaching transformation. That is why certain nights feel heavier than others for no logical reason. The pressure becomes strange. Your thoughts become louder. Your peace feels targeted. Sleep becomes interrupted. Emotions become unusually intense. And suddenly it feels like an invisible battle is happening beneath the surface of your ordinary life. Most people dismiss these moments because they only trust what they can physically explain. But chosen ones eventually realize something deeper. Darkness reacts when your spirit is close to freedom. The enemy does not waste energy attacking people who are comfortably asleep inside cycles that keep them small, distracted, and spiritually disconnected. Resistance increases when movement begins. And last night, your spirit may have sensed movement before your mind fully understood what was happening. That unexplained heaviness was not random. It was pressure responding to change. Because whenever heaven begins repositioning a chosen one toward healing, elevation, clarity, or separation from destructive cycles, opposition often intensifies first. The enemy attacks hardest when old chains are weakening. That is why confusion increases before breakthrough. Fear becomes louder before freedom. Emotional warfare intensifies before clarity arrives. The closer you get to becoming the version of yourself heaven intended, the more resistance tries to pull you backward into old patterns, old fears, and old emotional prisons. And if you look carefully at your life, you will notice something powerful. The strongest attacks often happened right before your biggest transformations. Right before you outgrew certain people. Right before new opportunities appeared. Right before healing began. Right before your perspective changed permanently. That pattern is not coincidence. It is spiritual resistance reacting to spiritual movement. Because the enemy understands something many humans ignore. Once a chosen one becomes fully aware, emotionally disciplined, and spiritually aligned, they become much harder to manipulate through fear, insecurity, distraction, or emotional dependency. That level of awareness threatens everything that once controlled them. So warfare increases before awakening fully manifests. That is why your night felt spiritually charged. Your spirit recognized pressure because your soul is standing near transition. Something inside you is breaking free from an old version of yourself that can no longer continue into your next season. And transformation always creates tension before clarity stabilizes. Think about it. Every major spiritual awakening in your life began with disruption first. Confusion forced reflection. Isolation created discernment. Pain exposed truth. Pressure revealed hidden strength. What felt like destruction often became the beginning of deeper alignment later. That is how God works with chosen ones. He allows pressure to expose what comfort would never reveal. And while the warfare feels exhausting in the moment, it is often evidence that something powerful is shifting beneath the surface. Because darkness attacks what threatens it. The enemy senses when your mindset is evolving beyond manipulation. It senses when your spirit is becoming harder to deceive. It senses when your peace no longer depends on external validation, toxic environments, or emotional dependency. And when those old attachments begin weakening, resistance rises desperately, trying to pull you back into the version of yourself heaven is trying to free you from. But here is the deeper truth hidden inside the battle. The warfare itself confirms that movement is happening. Your spirit is not being attacked because you are weak. You are being attacked because something inside you is awakening, something stronger. Something clearer, something spiritually aligned enough to threaten the limitations that once controlled your life. And one day, you will look back at nights like this and realize they were not random moments of fear, heaviness, or confusion. They were signs that your spirit was crossing into a new level of awareness your old life could no longer contain. The most important thing to understand about what happened last night is this. Heaven was not trying to scare you. It was trying to wake you up. There is a major difference between fear and awareness, and chosen ones often confuse the two during spiritual transitions. Fear traps people in confusion. Awareness pulls people into clarity. And what your spirit experienced was not meant to destroy your peace. It was meant to interrupt the version of you that had become too comfortable, ignoring what your soul already knew deep down. Because one of the most dangerous things that can happen to a chosen one is spiritual sleep. Not physical sleep, but emotional and spiritual unconsciousness. Continuing routines that no longer align. Staying connected to environments draining your spirit. Ignoring discernment because comfort feels easier than change. Pretending things are fine while your inner world quietly collapses beneath the surface. Heaven sees when that begins happening. And before destiny can shift externally, awareness must awaken internally first. That is why the sign came through interruption instead of explanation. God often speaks through disturbance because humans rarely change while they remain comfortable. Comfort keeps people asleep inside cycles that slowly disconnect them from purpose. But disruption creates a tension. Suddenly you start noticing things differently. Conversations feel heavier. Certain relationships no longer feel peaceful. Your spirit reacts strongly to environments you once tolerated easily. You begin sensing emotional tension beneath surface-level appearances. And while it feels uncomfortable at first, what is actually happening is sacred. Your awareness is expanding beyond the illusion your old life depended on. That is why chosen ones frequently experience spiritual awakenings during moments that appear confusing externally. Heaven interrupts normal patterns because your future cannot emerge from the same level of unconsciousness that kept you spiritually stagnant before. The strange night, the emotional heaviness, the dream, the sudden awakening, all of it carried one message beneath the surface. Pay attention. Something around you is changing, and your spirit can no longer afford to remain asleep to it. Because awareness itself is protection. Discernment protects you from environments your eyes cannot immediately evaluate. Spiritual clarity protects you from emotional traps disguised as opportunities. Inner knowing protects you from relationships that appear healthy externally, but quietly damage your peace internally. And heaven knows your next season requires that level of awareness. That is why the interruption became unavoidable. God was preparing your spirit for a transition your conscious mind has not fully caught up to yet. And even though part of you still wants logical explanations for everything you felt, your soul already recognizes the deeper truth. You are changing. Your perspective is changing. Your spiritual sensitivity is increasing. Things you once ignored no longer feel harmless. Things you once tolerated no longer feel aligned. That is not emotional instability. That is awakening. Your spirit is beginning to reject what your future cannot carry. And that process often begins quietly before external reality visibly shifts. Suddenly, old environments feel temporary. Certain people feel energetically distant. Old goals lose emotional power. New desires emerge that you cannot fully explain yet. All because heaven is repositioning your inner world before transforming your external one. And one day, you will realize something that changes how you view nights like this forever. The interruption was never punishment. It was preparation. God disturbed your peace because your future required your attention. He allowed discomfort because your spirit was too valuable to remain asleep inside a life you were meant to outgrow. And maybe that is why what happened last night felt impossible to ignore. Because deep down, beneath the confusion, fear, and emotional intensity, your spirit already understood something your mind is only beginning to accept now. Your life is shifting spiritually, and heaven is trying to prepare you before the transformation fully arrives.